So just to start off with current events, especially going by social media, given that's all we really have to work with when it comes to Gilgit-Baltistan. We've been seeing many protests by the Balthistan Students Federation. Could you tell us who are they?
What do they do?
What do they do? What are these protests about?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Balthistan Student Federation, it's a students' body. I mean, you can tell from the name.
Right.
And they talk about issues of the students pertaining to, educational institutions, lack of educational institutions in Gilgit-Baltistan, and the problems that students of Gilgit-Baltistan face in different parts of Pakistan. But on top of that, it also evolved as a parallel nationalist body. So a lot of students who are nationalists join this organization, right? If somebody is very religious, like Shia religious or Sunni religious, they will go to the students' organizations of those religious organizations, right?
Right.
But if you're a nationalist, you believe in a Balti identity or your identity connected with Ladakh and Tibet, then you join BSF. And that's why they have the swastika sign on it, which is, sign of prosperity for all Baltis, Ladakhis, and Tibetans and Indians and everywhere. So they continue to talk about our relationship with Ladakh, and they continue to expose, historical facts and other, debates that happen in Baltistan, and especially there's a huge Balti population in Karachi. So Baltistan Student Federation is way more active in Karachi than in Baltistan.
Okay.
And, that is slowly changing. They are bringing their influence back in Baltistan now. And this is, threatening Pakistan, because Pakistan does not really want, this thing to happen where we try to associate ourselves more emotionally, more closer to, let's say, Ladakh than Pakistan, than Islamabad. Now, the other thing that, is threatening Pakistan is that in the past, Baltistan Student Federation used to believe in our ethnic and linguistic identity, but at the same time, it believed in the Federation of Pakistan. So it used to say the people who ran that organization, let's say 20 years ago, they used to say, yes, linguistically, we're connected with people in Ladakh and Tibet and Bhutan, but if we are part of Pakistan administratively, it is fine. There's no problem in it. But this generation, which has taken the reins of this organization, they are now saying, no, we're not Pakistani, we are disputed.
Right.
And we're part of Jammu and Kashmir. So I think that is very threatening for Pakistan, because Pakistan would not expect something like that to come from the Baltis.
Right.
What's BSF's relationship with people who are in Gilgit and not Baltistan?
What was your first word? What is
I said, what is Baltistan Student Federation's relationship with people in Gilgit who are not Baltis?
Yes, so we have 7 major ethnic groups. So Baltis are, if you exclude the Pakistani settlers, Baltis are about 30 to 35% of the total population. And that's what, BSF represents. So people in Gilgit, they speak different languages, different ethnicities, they have their own cultural identities, and they have their own student bodies, right? So like nationalists, in Gilgit, for instance, they try to support BSF, even though, we're not the same ethnicity, but all the nationalist groups to support each other. So the relationship is pretty warm with other nationalists. And that has happened recently because BSF started calling Gilgit-Baltistan Disputed. So that has, brought them closer to the other nationalists, and that's an aspect that is threatening Pakistan.
The entire idea of turning Gilgit-Baltistan into the 5th province of Pakistan, how has that gone down with these organizations and with people on the ground?
Yeah, so all the nationalist organizations, so as I said, BSF used to say that we want to be a province of Pakistan about 20 years ago, right? When we were in BSF, the support of the nationalists who call Gilgit-Baltistan part of Kashmir or disputed was, pretty low.
Right.
They used to call us, like Kashmiriyon ke chamche, or like, not loyal to our own ethnic group and stuff like that, right? But I think this generation is very clear on that. A lot of hard work that is done by people like Manzoor Parwana, for instance, Shahzad Agha, and, Asif Naji, bunch of other people who have been talking about these issues consistently for the last 10, 15 years, right? Eventually, the people in Baltistan, they have realized that, we're not Pakistani. So they're now very close to, let's say, people in Gilgit like Babajan, for instance, right? Nawaz Naji, or, what's his name? Karakram National Movement's Taruf Abbas, and, all these people, they are now sympathetic to the cause of Baltistan Student Federation.
So you spoke of a tangible shift in the Baltistan Student Federations and related organization across the spectrum of different ethnic groups in Gilgit-Baltistan.
Which seems to be generational. What changed?
So what changed, and when and how?
I think it's, a lot of students who go to Karachi, Karachi is home to MQM. MQM has a very strong base in Karachi, it's their home. And MQM is a nationalist political party.
Right.
So I think people in Gilgit-Baltistan, they get a lot of influence. Pashtuns go there, they come out as nationalists. Karachi is, where all this, the manufacturing of nationalism happens. So I think this realization that, if we are Pakistani, then where is our representation in Pakistan? Where Pakistan's constitution says 4 provinces. Where is the 5th province? They started exposing those lies that were fabricated by Pakistani politicians when they come to Gilgit and Skardo, right? So I think these educated people, they are different because, they're living in a different era. It's the 21st century. It's an era of social media. You saw, what was that in Middle East that started with Egypt,
The Arab Spring?
No, something like Spring something. The Twitter wave, which changed a lot of regimes in Middle East. In
Arab Spring.
Yeah, that was like your Facebook.
What was that again?
Arab Spring.
Arab Spring, yeah. Was that Arab Spring or Purple Spring? I don't know. Yeah, Arab Spring. Maybe.
Arab Spring.
Arab Spring.
Yeah.
So this is that time when these people are exposed to so many different, ideas, which probably 20, 30 years ago, they were just watching PTV, Pakistan television. There was one channel run by Pakistani military, and constant bombardment of anti-Hindu and anti-India, information. That was it. They're enemies of Islam, they're enemies of Muslim. So if you grow up in that time, and then if you grow up in the 21st century, I think your outlook is going to be very different. So people like myself, we kind of became a bridge for them, with our past, and so these youth, who are in their 20s now, their late 20s maybe, they are very active, and they do not want to, accept the myth that Pakistanis are throwing at them.
We had asked this
exploitation, and the other thing I think now you see is that after Pervez Musharraf, he started the CPEC, right? A lot of Chinese exploitation has happened. Right? People used to love China because all they did was they constructed one road that connected Gilgit-Baltistan with Islamabad. So you could go to Karachi and have education. You could go to Islamabad and have medical, facility, right? So they used to love China. 20 years later, they started CPEC and exploitation. So now they are, beating local people, stealing their minerals and, heavy metals and gems, and doing a lot of other bad things all over the world in Africa that now we are exposed to and we're learning, like Sri Lanka, like Nepal, other places, Myanmar. So that exploitation by Pakistan, because of the improved infrastructure, has also brought a lot of resentment against Pakistan. So I think that is also feeding into how the youth in their 20s and late 20s look at Pakistan, and Now they're saying, look, we're not your part, so stop exploitation, it's illegal. So it is the exploitation and the hurt and the pain that is forcing them to look for legal ways to try to stop Pakistan. And one legal way is obviously, we're not your part, so stop it. So I think this is, something that is a catalyst there.
We had asked you this question before this wave of protest began, and we'd love to ask you this again. What's the perception of India on the ground now with these student bodies and with the common people of Gilgit-Baltistan? How do they look at India?
I mean, it's very hard to say, let's say 20 years ago, they would see India as an enemy that is just out there, try to get our land, right? Enemy of Islam, enemy of Muslim, trying to encroach on our land. But now they see India as a legal contender when it comes to Kashmir issue, because they know that it was all the stories around letter of accession, for instance, right? They didn't know anything about that. They didn't know that we are part of Jammu and Kashmir. They thought that we kicked the Dogras out, and it was the end of the story. And now we look forward, and we keep moving forward, and but they didn't know the constitutional complications, right? So they know that India is a very strong legal contender, and they also know that Pakistan is to withdraw. Without Pakistan withdrawing, the Kashmir issue cannot move forward. So this is what's threatening Pakistan, that local people, these students, they know that Pakistan has a much weaker case compared to India. So, and a lot of these students, they ended up becoming lawyers, attorneys, like Asif Naji, he's an attorney, right? There are a bunch of others. I think Javed is an advocate, and others. So they try to look at issue not just from the religious sentimental perspective. They also look at it as a legal case, and they're like, what is the problem? Why are we stuck for 70 years if we are so important for Pakistan? They have done like more than 25 amendments in their constitution since 1973. What is stopping them from doing another amendment and incorporating us? This is forcing them to look deeper into the issue and find out that it is because, our legal relationship that was established with India is much stronger and much firm compared to, Pakistan. Right. And Kashmir issue for Pakistan and army, for instance, just became like a duck laying golden egg. They would exploit it for their own financial benefits, but they would not do anything for the betterment of the local people. And this is something that is opening their eyes.
So Senge, it seems that your generation seems to hold many answers for a very tangible shift over here. The world knows you as a very prominent voice for Gilgit-Baltistan in Washington. We spoke earlier about this very briefly. You did mention that you were Balti, you were from Shigar, and recently you just mentioned that you were part of the Baltistan Students Federation. So I'm going to ask a very open-ended question here in some ways. So who is Senge Sering? And why do you do what you do? What motivated you? What happened?
I mean, it's not, really fancy story. And I'm just like any other person who grew up away from Gilgit-Baltistan. And I don't know what happened. I got access to these books that showed, and I was probably 10 or 11 at that time.
Wow.
It showed our relationship with Ladakh and Tibet, and by the time I was 13, I could write our script. I had my father, he had the financial, capacity to help me in that way. And he never stopped me, so I was able to get books from Nepal, or, obviously it was not possible to get them from India. So all these important books, became my resource. And it kind of like opened a gate, a different, way of looking at Gilgit-Baltistan. So I was, drawn towards it, our linguistic relationship, and I learned about our language, and that's how it all started. That moved me closer towards BSF, and then I remember in the city of Lahore, where we were living, we used to have, all these different gatherings of BSF in our house. And students would come and, we would like entertain them and, serve them tea and stuff. And we'll talk about our issues. And at that time, it was just about, our national identity as an ethnic group. We hardly talked about Kashmir. We hardly talked about, any dispute because we were not really aware of that.
Yeah.
But then, I started learning more, and as I grew older, and I had access to other educational institutions, went abroad, and I think it kind of like broadened my exposure and horizon, and I think probably I was a nationalist, right from the start. So I just kept building on it, and. So yeah, I mean, the thing that is different, you could say about Senge Sering is that, I don't mince words, I don't try to be diplomatic. And I told people that, we are not part of Pakistan. Not only we're not part of Pakistan, but we Indian citizens. And, that is the only way we can get our constitutional rights. So I think I've been saying and doing that for the last 15, 20 years. And, now people, take the issue more seriously. They don't laugh at what we say.
No.
They don't look at, purely from the perspective of two-nation theory, Hindu and Muslim. They are trying to acknowledge and respect the complexities within this issue, and trying to see that, what is stopping from Pakistan is not just that, Pakistan do not want to do it, it's just Pakistan can't do it. Even now when they're talking about having a transitional, temporary, province, they will never be able to completely, incorporate Gilgit-Baltistan like Punjab or Sindh or Balochistan. They won't be able to do that. So I think, so this is the different line that I took from other nationalists. The other nationalists said we should have our own country. And I told them there's no political constitutional framework to do that. You will never get any international support because there's no basis for it. So I think I have been, very clear from the beginning that this is the path that we need to take. Whatever Ladakh is getting is what we're going to get. Right. Whatever Rajouri or Punch or, Kishtawar is going to get, that's what we're going to get. That's we're part of it. So yeah, we start talk about this whole myth about the expulsion of the Dogras, the liberation movement, and all that farce and the myth that exists around it. I mean, not a great fancy story, just
No, it's incredibly fascinating. And does actually give any insights into an entire generation of people that we did not know about, until then.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge shift, 180 degrees from, my father believing that whatever happened in 1947 was it. We're Pakistani and we're just Pakistani just like anyone else. To today, people, calling Pakistan out, right, and asking it to withdraw, and calling it an occupier. I think this is a huge shift.
So in 2019, India did a de facto abrogation of the special status for the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Many Indian analysts think that this whole temporary provision thing that has been forced onto Gilgit-Baltistan is a response to that. However, we saw the BSF engaging in massive protests after this had happened. And similarly, the Pakistanis cracking down on the BSF after this temporary provision had been brought in. Why didn't this pull the tempers down in Baltistan? Why is it that the Baltis are still angry after getting what Pakistan thinks they should be getting?
India makes everything so easy, because it is Gilgit-Baltistan, Ladakh, Jammu, Kashmir are constitutional part of India, right? So when India wants to do something, they do it in a very standard way. They go to the parliament, they debate about it, they do a voting, and then 2/3 majority votes for it, and then the state is changed, and that is implemented. Whereas in Pakistan, in Gilgit-Baltistan and POK, Muzaffarabad, Mirpur, it's a lot of political rhetoric that hum aapko ye denge, hum aapko wo denge, and it's been 70 years.
Right.
Nothing, done. So I think there's a lot of frustration. Like, why is India able to do everything and you're not? That is forcing people to look at the legal papers, right? So what BSF is, doing is, because BSF claims that Ladakh and Gilgit-Baltistan are one body, right? So they want the Kargil road to open, for instance. They want the divided family members to be able to, see each other and meet each other through the LOC and not through Wagah border. Right. They want China and Pakistan army to stop all the land exploitation. So BSF has gotten itself into this, this thing which is really vital for Pakistan army, is that they should be able to have access to all the land they need to do whatever they want to do with China. So BSF is just like in Gilgit, it used to be just one or two people there, right? Used to be BNF, used to be Baba Jan, used to be KNM. Now BSF has joined them in talking about the same issues in Balthistan. So the crackdown is a standard procedure. What the Pakistan army does is that they try to scare you, they try to intimidate you while you're still young in your infancy, right? And that's what they're trying to do. But it seems like, BSF has been able to hold its ground, right? And a lot of this, national TV rhetoric that's going on against them, blame game and all that. They have been able to sustain that, and so I think BSF is slowly evolving itself into a more mature political group. In the past, I remember, a lot of people who were part of BSF, they would just abandon politics and join a Shia party of Pakistan People's Party once they start a different life, which is, getting married and getting a job. So BSF was just their school or college hobby kind of thing, This is now different. Now BSF has evolved into Baltistan Youth, Federation, BYF, right? So it's not just the students, but I think they are trying to galvanize and bring all these people. And now an important member of BSF, ex-President Sajjad Agha, he is in the Gilgit Assembly. So Nawaz Naji was there, one nationalist, and now we have Sajjad Agha, who's talking about local land rights. So I think this is also kind of, threatening army, because Sajjad Agha is affiliated with Pakistan People's Party, which is talking about local land rights, right? So I think that there is some hope that these people will be able to make more noise, and so that's why the crackdown.
So picking up from where you're talking about the status of Gilgit-Baltistan post-occupation, where there is a connection to Jammu and Kashmir and also a lack of, at least projected as such. Yeah. And we have read about a heads of agreement in 1949 where there was an agreement with the so-called leaders of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, where what was then called the northern areas was supposed to be directly governed by the central government through a special ministry. Now that seems to get muddied up or get lost in the general chaos of all things connected to this region. Perhaps you could clarify the status of Gilgit-Baltistan under occupation, how that might have changed, where it's going forward.
And how it's relevant to the people in Gilgit-Baltistan.
Yeah, how does it affect people on the ground?
Yeah, so, when we had a united Jammu and Kashmir, Baltistan was a tehsil of Ladakh district, and Gilgit, different parts of Gilgit had different, administrative and constitutional status within Jammu Kashmir. So Astor and Gilgit City, where they were district, right? There were some parts which were rented to the British and they were returned, and they were not incorporated into a formal district. and they were part of Chilas and Yagistan, Dar el-Tanger, which were governed differently, separately from Gilgit district. So what happened is that Pakistan tried to establish a parallel government in Muzaffarabad, and Gilgit-Baltistan was important because of its, location. The reason why we have a Kashmir issue today, that reason is Gilgit's location. British, what was his name, Major Brown, would not have initiated this whole thing of coup against Maharaja if Gilgit was not bordering Afghanistan and Xinjiang in Tajikistan. So it was its location that this whole thing started, and we are stuck with it for the last 73 years, right? So that's why they wanted to, because of its important, status, they did not want the people in Muzaffarabad to take control of it. So what was the excuse? The excuse was that there's no land connection. And that is true even today, that for somebody in Muzaffarabad to go to Gilgit, you have to come to, Pakistan first, right?
Oh, wow.
So you have to go to Balakot, where we had the big earthquake, and then we also had Indian, aerial raid, right? Yeah. So first you have to go to Balakot, and then you have to go to Naran, and then you go to Chilas, and then into Gilgit. There's no other, functioning road, and that's what they're demanding. They're demanding a tunnel under the Pir Panchal range. So Astor district could be directly connected with the Neelam Valley in Muzaffarabad division. So that was the excuse, but the reason was obviously was location. Pakistan wanted to keep an area which was so important for the British. But if you remember, when Pakistan was created, it was a dominion of British, right? It was not a sovereign country. For several years, it was British dominion. So King George and Queen Victoria, they were still dealing with the foreign affairs of Pakistan. That's why when Balochistan, even though the Mir of Balochistan, Jinnah was able to get letter of accession from Mir of Balochistan, but it needed approval by King George to become part of Pakistan. So Pakistan was kind of still like a province of the British Raj, right? With the foreign affairs and defense in the hand of the British. So British were looking at Afghanistan and Gilgit from a very different perspective.
The Great Game was still very active.
Yeah, then people, let's say people in Punjab or Sindh, right? So this whole thing started like that. So I don't think people in Muzaffarabad had any say. It's not that they gave away, they were nobody. They were just happy that something has happened, and now we are seen at par with Srinagar, right?
Okay.
So a far-flung area of Jammu Kashmir where probably nobody even cared, suddenly it became so important that it was seen as Srinagar too, right?
Yeah. Or
a shadow government. So they were very happy to collaborate with Pakistan to gain that access to politics and financial resources, and they gave away Gilgit-Baltistan because they had no say in it. Muzaffarabad was never an important city as far as the politics of Jammu Kashmir was concerned. It was Kashmir, Srinagar, and then it was Jammu city. So anything on this side of Pir Panjal or Pir Panchal was not, seen as important. It was just, a transit to Pakistan for trade. The main road, it was through Sialkot, Jammu and Sialkot. This road that Pakistan built later, it's a new thing. So anyways, yeah, so that has changed a lot of things in Gilgit-Baltistan, right? It has given Pakistan access to China. China is the most important country for, Pakistan. And it has given Pakistan access to Central Asia. And because of, Gilgit's positioning and China's, a land link and Xinjiang's land link to Gilgit, Pakistan became extremely important in the Afghan issue. And, there were jihadi organizations functioning in Gilgit and in Xinjiang during that time. So I think it is all, built around the strategic importance of Gilgit. That even today we see that now, because of the removal of Article 370, Pakistani army thinks that, unki game khatam ho gayi hai. There's not much left in the valley,
Sure.
Valley doesn't control Ladakh anymore, and Valley would not be able to do anything in Gilgit-Baltistan anyway. So I think they are trying to take a different stance, which is that CPAC is important, and because of CPAC, we have to secure Gilgit-Baltistan. So they're doing this dummy thing, and trying to eventually it will be incorporated, but right now they're trying to do a temporary thing.